Before we begin, if you enjoy stories that explore human emotions, tough choices, and those quiet moments that can change everything, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think, and you won't miss what comes next. That afternoon carried a strange kind of stillness, not the peaceful kind, not the comforting silence you get when everything feels right. This was different. It was hollow, like something important had quietly slipped away without making a sound. There was no chaos, no obvious problem, just an emptiness that made even the smallest noises feel louder than they should have been. The low hum of the refrigerator seemed to echo across the room. A bird outside called once, then again, each sound stretching into the quiet like it had nowhere else to go. I sat alone in the living room, flipping through the pages of a magazine. My eyes moved from line to line, image to image, but nothing stayed. Not a single word registered in my mind. It was as if I was just going through the motions. Ryan was out of town. Again, another work trip. Another few days of being alone in a house that suddenly felt much bigger than it really was. And strangely, that part didn't bother me anymore. At least, not in the way it used to. There was a time when I would have counted the hours until he came back, when I would have missed him in ways that felt sharp and undeniable. But now it felt normal. That realization sat heavier than I expected, because it wasn't his absence that unsettled me. It was the silence he left behind. I glanced at my phone without thinking, almost like a reflex. My thumb hovered over the screen, hoping without admitting it that there would be something waiting for me. A message, a notification, anything, but the screen stayed blank. No missed calls, no texts, no reminders that someone somewhere was thinking about me. And in that moment, something clicked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make me aware of it. My life had become predictable. Painfully predictable. The kind of routine that feels safe at first, until one day you realize it's no longer comforting, it's confining. I leaned back into the couch, letting out a slow breath. I cared about Ryan, or at least I believed I did. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. Not suddenly, not in a way that demanded attention. It had been gradual. So gradual that I hadn't noticed it happening. Affection had softened into habit, and habit had quietly turned into distance. Emotional distance. The kind that doesn't show up in arguments or dramatic confrontations, but in the spaces between conversations, in the things left unsaid. And now, sitting there in that quiet room, I could finally feel it, clearly and comfortably. Then a sharp sound broke through the stillness. A car door closing outside. I turned my head toward the window, instinctively. And that's when I saw him, Lucas, walking up the driveway with the kind of confidence that made everything around him seem just a little more alive. An old family friend. Someone Ryan trusted completely. Someone who had always been. Easy to be around, relaxed, charismatic, the kind of person who didn't have to try too hard to be noticed. I stood up, almost automatically, and made my way to the door. When I opened it, I couldn't hide the surprise in my voice. Lucas, what are you doing here? He smiled casual, familiar, like he had every right to be there. Ryan called me, he said. He forgot some documents and asked if I could pick them up. Of course he did. That sounded exactly like something Ryan would do. Lucas stepped slightly forward, glancing past me into the house. Hope I'm not interrupting anything. I shook my head quickly. No, not at all. Come in. The moment he walked inside, something shifted. Not in an obvious way. Nothing dramatic. But the atmosphere felt different. As if the stillness that had been pressing down on me all afternoon had quietly lifted just enough for me to notice. He set his bag down near the table and took a quick look around. Still looks great in here, he said. You always had a good eye for this kind of thing. I let out a small laugh, brushing it off. Flattery isn't going to help you find the paperwork any faster. He smiled. Worth a try. I led him toward the office, explaining where Ryan usually kept his documents. While he started searching, I stayed back for a moment. And without meaning to, I started noticing things, comparisons I didn't want to make. Lucas moved with an ease that felt present, engaged, alive in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. And it struck me uncomfortably that Ryan hadn't felt like that in a long time. I immediately pushed the thought away. It felt unfair and necessary, but once a thought like that enters your mind, it doesn't leave easily. Lucas came back into the living room a few minutes later, holding a folder. Found it. His sleeves were rolled up slightly, and for the first time, I noticed the tattoo along his forearm. It wasn't something I had seen before. Or maybe I just hadn't paid attention. Either way, my eyes lingered a second too long. He caught it. Curious, he asked, a slight grin forming. I looked away quickly, feeling a bit embarrassed. It's interesting. That was all I could manage. We ended up sitting down. At first, it was just casual conversation. Small talk. The kind that fills time without meaning much. But then, it shifted gradually, effortlessly. Lucas started telling stories about his work, his travels, random moments that somehow felt more vivid the way he described them. There was a warmth in his voice, a kind of energy that pulled you in without trying too hard. And before I realized it, I was laughing. Actually laughing. Not the polite kind. Not the kind you give out of habit, but the kind that feels real. For the first time in a long while, I felt lighter, more present, more engaged. And for a few minutes, everything else faded into the background. The silence, the routine, the distance, all of it gone. Then something shifted, subtly. He leaned back slightly, his gaze settling on mine for just a moment longer than usual. It wasn't obvious, but it was enough. Enough to change the air between us. When he reached for his glass at the same time I did, our hands brushed, just briefly. Barely a second, but it sent a sharp, unexpected jolt through me. I pulled my hand back quickly, letting out a small, awkward laugh. Too fast, too forced. You okay? He asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. Yeah, I said quickly. It's just a little warm in here. I stood up, using it as an excuse to create distance, to reset, to clear whatever had just happened. I moved into the kitchen, taking a moment to breathe, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it grew stronger because I could feel it, that awareness, that tension. And when I turned around, he was there, leaning against the doorway, watching me. You seem different today, he said quietly. I frowned slightly. Different how? He paused, as if searching for the right words. I don't know, he admitted, just more awake. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. It wasn't playful. It wasn't casual. It was real. And that made it harder to ignore. Lucas, I started, avoiding his gaze. You should probably go. He didn't move. Why? The question was simple. But I didn't have an answer. At least, not when I was ready to say out loud. He took a small step closer. And suddenly, the space between us felt charged, heavy with everything neither of us was saying. This isn't right, I said softly. I know, he replied. There was no hesitation in his voice, no denial, no excuses. But it feels real, and for a split second, everything else disappeared. The house, the silence, the past, the future, all of it gone. There was only that moment, that feeling, that choice. Every instinct in me told me to step back, to stop, to create distance before something irreversible happened. But I didn't move. I just stood there, caught between what I knew and what I felt. And then the front door opened. The sound was immediate, Sharp, grounding, reality rushed back in all at once. We stepped apart instantly. No words, no hesitation, just distance. The moment dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Voices filled the house, laughter, movement, normalcy, everything returning to what it was supposed to be. But something had changed. Something quiet. Something internal. Lucas left not long after. And before he walked out the door, he glanced at me once. Just once. I couldn't read his expression. Maybe I didn't want to. Because nothing had happened. Not really. No lines had been crossed. No decisions had been made. And yet, everything felt different. That afternoon became something I couldn't ignore. A moment I couldn't forget. Not because of what happened, but because of how close it came to happening. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in life aren't defined by actions, but by awareness. By realizing just how easily things could have gone another way. How fragile boundaries can be. How thin the line is between restraint and regret. And how, in a single moment, everything you believe about yourself can be tested. So if you want more stories like this, stories about temptation, about choices, about the quiet moments that define who we are, make sure you subscribe. Because sometimes the stories that stay with us the longest are the ones where nothing happens, and yet everything changes.